Hi, and welcome to What's Important to You with me, James Dean. On the show, I will be talking to people from all walks of life and asking them the question, what's important to you? Because I believe once we understand what's important, then we can build the life that we truly want to live. I hope you are inspired by the guests that I talk to and answer that question for yourself and build the life that you truly want. You can support the show by clicking on the subscribe button, sharing your favorite episode, or leaving your comments. Thanks for watching. Today's guest inspires Christian entrepreneurs to step into their calling. He helps people get clarity on their identity, community, and calling. He believes that identity answers who are you at your deep core level. Community answers who are you with, who supports you. And calling answers why are you here in this place at this time. He is a 2-time international #1 best-selling author. Next Level Your Life in January 2023 was a #1 in 31 categories, and the Transformational Journey in October 2023 was #1 in 60 categories. Today, we find out what's important to 𝘿𝙖𝙡𝙀. Hi, Dale. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, hello, James, and it's nice to make a new connection here.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this, and great to meet you. And we're going to dive straight in, Dale, with the first question, which as always is, Dale, what's important to you?
What's important to me is calling being a spiritual pull that draws you forward, bigger than passion, bigger than mission, bigger than purpose. It encompasses all of those and really helps you choose a direction for your life that is meaningful and gets you to really, I believe, where God created you to be.
Interesting. I love actually the fact that the word you said there were calling, but I love the fact that you said all those other words that we hear quite a lot about, whether it be mission, vision, all those other things, and they all come underneath that for you. So
For
that's
me,
yeah.
For
Go
me,
ahead.
they do. They're pieces of the puzzle.
Okay.
But until you put that calling piece, the spiritual pull around them, they don't necessarily make sense.
Okay.
At least they did not for me. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I'm interested because as we would have shared in the introduction about yourself, your calling is very much from a Christian perspective, and so I'd like to know, in a sense of, is that something that's always been there in your life, or is it something that you found, or because calling to me sounds like something that you came to, or where did that come about, is my question, I suppose.
So the story is, no, it was not always Christian. It wasn't always something. I grew up in a non-Christian household, as a matter of fact. Now, somewhere along age 25, I prayed the prayer to receive Christ, but I really had no life change. Everything was just the same as before.
Yeah.
And actually, the end of that year, my mom died unexpectedly, and I turned my back on God, and I turned my back on emotions, and I turned my back on relationships in a big way. And it was kind of like I was trying to be Mr. Spock, with no emotions and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But that didn't work so well long term. And so it was one of those things that I just kept going. I was in the computer industry. I was in the IT profession. I was a nerd of nerds. I did all that kind of stuff. But I started drifting more towards the management side of things. And to manage people, you have to have relationships with people, right? And such like that. And it was actually in 1992 that these words came out of my mouth. I had a great job. I was making a lot of good money, but these words came out of my mouth. And the words were, well, this is just a job, not a career. And it was in that moment that my heart got through to my head and was telling me, okay, I was really made for something different, something bigger, something more. And I thought the word I had at that point was career, because I really didn't have anything else. So I started down what turned out to be a 30-year journey And I was not even an active Christian at this point, but I was looking for something bigger.
Yeah.
And going through the process, I changed jobs a couple of times, got into computer consulting, got into all kinds of stuff, and actually ended up becoming a Christian. I was actually at a funeral and heard the message about Jesus Christ in a way that went from my head to my heart. And at that point, I started turning my life over to Christ, and I started following him. Now, this is not about me trying to impose that on
Yeah.
anybody else. Okay, I'm not trying to turn everybody into Christian. I'm just telling my story here at this
Yeah.
point. So anyway, I was doing all this stuff. I was growing, and I found a career, and I realized that wasn't big enough. And so I started looking for, well, what's bigger? What am I really looking for? What is my heart really searching after?
Mm.
So I just kept looking and I kept looking. And one of those things that I found at the time for me was coaching. And coaching was pulling a lot of the pieces together for me, really opening myself more to relationships, opening myself more um, to being a leader even,
Mm.
and putting together teams of people. One of the biggest things in my whole IT career was I created a team in 2006, 2007. I was working for a computer consulting company, and we sold a contract to a client in Houston. And that contract went annual in 2007, and it was over $1 million at a higher profit margin. And it was about 10% of the whole company in terms of profit that I
Wow.
was working for. And so it got a lot of attention. But the thing I'm most proud about is that 14 years later, when I finally left that company for good, we still had a contract with that client. The
Yes.
company still had a contract with that client. So I built the team right, and it had continued on, even though I'd only worked with them about 7 of those 14 years. So
Yes.
it was, I felt like I put the team together well, and put a lot of culture in place and such like that. So,
Yeah.
so that really encouraged me along that. I got into coaching, and coaching started asking more questions, right? Got into passion and got into purpose and got into mission and got into all these things. And I dived deep into each one of those areas because I was looking for something. I was looking
Yeah.
for something bigger. And I really didn't know what it was. And but in 2022, I finally found what I feel is the biggest thing that puts all these pieces together, and that is calling. So, like I said, calling to me is bigger than career, bigger than dreams, bigger than purpose, bigger than mission, and it encompasses all of those.
Thank you. No, it's fabulous. And thank you so much for sharing that. And there's so much in that I want to kind of unpack in that. But the first thing I think to say from the story you just shared, and I think it would probably resonate with a lot of people in the sense of when you were that sort of 25-year-old, and it can happen at any point in age isn't it's kind of irrelevant, but that your story was around that 25 when the trauma of losing your mom at that age and all those other things that were happening, in the sense that you said like cutting off from the emotion almost, or not even having it, that sort of, whether deliberately or undeliberately or whatever it is, but that, and it's only when you're able to reconnect your heart and your head and your gut, like the whole body. And that, because I think there's an element, and I would have experienced that in some ways as well, where you still do it now, when you're all in your head, and it's, and that's when it's like, because when everything's just only in your head, and it's just that overthinking or not thinking, or there's no emotion to say to any of it. It's quite a sort of, from my experience, it kind of keeps you stuck, kind of keeps you stagnant almost, in a word would be my word. So I find it quite interesting that before you could kind of find where you wanted to go, you had to reconnect with yourself essentially.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Um, I've actually gotten into following some brain science here and some of the emotions and things like that. And there's a phrase that I really like that I got out of one of the books. The book is actually called Rare Leadership, but it talks about the brain science and how the brain is created by God to have these emotions and the logical side, but they work together, right? And when you have a bad emotion like I did with my mom dying unexpectedly, and you're not processing it, you're not actually going through the grieving
Mm,
process and everything. They said it's like having a TV that's turned up on full volume and you just unplug it. You don't turn it off, you just unplug the TV. Of course, this doesn't work with all the newer technology,
mm,
right? But
mm.
you talk about the old ones.
Yeah.
Up at full volume, you unplug it, you stick it in the closet, right? And you forget about it. But at some point, you're going to open that closet and you're going to say, what's going on with this TV? You're going to plug it in and it just hits you at full volume and it's shouting at you and you don't know how to handle these emotions because
Yes.
they're all raw and they're all new and all that. And
Yes.
so you have to actually go through the process
Yeah.
of grieving in this case. It may be
Yes.
grief, it may be something else, but you have to work through the process and get those emotions settled down so that they're at a
Mm.
reasonable volume, so that when you turn it on or plug it in the future, it doesn't overwhelm you.
That's a great, really good analogy and description of it. I hadn't heard it that way before, but I can totally get that thing. As you say, it's the whole the sometimes it seems the easier thing, as you say, to put it away in the closet and just ignore it. But at some point, whether it's going to be curiosity or whether it's going to be you just open it and see it there, you know what I mean? That sort of moment where you're going to look at it again, and then
Yeah.
it could, as you say, cause that reaction as such that's going to come out of it. The other thing there, from just before I forget this, or the point I want to on the story you just shared, and you say you went back from when you were 25 to now, and the other point I think is really important for people to hear and resonate. I hope that it resonates with them is that the fact that you wanted the length of time that it's taken you to get to where you are, and the fact that you kept trying different things, you kept, you knew you wanted something more or something different. I don't know if, whatever the word is,
Mhm.
but you were willing to try and willing to kind of keep, well, it's not quite that, it's not quite that. So my question, I suppose, in there is like, how do you keep yourself trying all over the years when you still, because people can, there's easy things to think, oh, well, forget about it, I'll give up. How did you sort of keep going in that?
That's why I use the word calling.
Mm,
It's one of those things that probably in my own self, I might have given up. And I have to admit, there were years probably where I didn't focus on things like that, and it was like, I'm happy now, I'll just do
yeah.
this. But there's always this little nagging thing that's saying, okay, you can do more, you can do better, you can help more people, whatever the case might be.
Mm,
And for me, it was one of those things. I just always wanted to grow. I've been big in personal development. I was big into John Maxwell in 2000, Patrick Lencioni with his teamwork. That's one of the things I credit for me building that team that did so well.
mm,
All these things. And it's just like, okay, I've got all this stuff around me. I've done all these things in my life. How do I put it together? How do I make the best use of it? I'm always one, I really want to apply things.
mm.
I love learning, but if I learn it and don't do anything with it, that's wasted time for me. I
Sure.
want to learn it and do something with it. I want to learn it and apply it.
Mm,
And so, and I feel like my life's that way. If I don't apply my life, if I don't do something, if I don't leave the world a better place, I'm not really doing what I'm here on earth to do.
mm,
I'm here to do something to make the world better somehow.
yeah.
I was always wondering what's that how? How do I do that?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So that was always one thing that drove me. And yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
I'll just leave it
yeah,
at that.
yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, no, because I think it's, and that's where I think from my experience with from either talking to people on this show or just talking to people in general or people I've worked with is that the reason they get stuck is they the how is the challenging part. They say that application is the sort of can be the bit because it's the doing, whether it be the learning, whether it be reading, whether it be going to a class, whether it be going back to school, whether it be doing something. In some ways, as challenging that can be, that's sometimes the easier bit. It's just then putting yourself out there and kind of going, now using that new skills, using that new knowledge, and I like what you said there as well. It's for the better of other people. It's, because otherwise you're holding it on to yourself. If you've learned all this stuff that could improve the lives of others, then there's an element I think that comes back to that calling. Well, why would I not use it? But that's the bit that I think a lot of people are worried about, is that doing. It's the kind of like, okay, now I actually have to go and do. So you've done that, because I'm going to fast forward now, because you've done what you did with the IT and all that over the years. You've done that career. You're now doing stuff for yourself now. When did that come about? When you think, well, because that whole thing of application doing, you got this calling. When did you go, right, now I'm going to do this?
So that was a journey as well. Okay.
Mm,
2004, I got into a program that really, I had been kind of unlocking those emotions for quite a while anyway. But 2004 took it from, okay, I'd unlocked it from, I don't know, 10% to maybe 30% or something like that. Well, this blew it wide open. This took it like to 99% or something like that. So went through that program. It actually, looking back on it, it had some elements of coaching in it, but I really didn't understand that. I didn't know about coaching
yeah,
in 2004. I heard about life coaching in 2007 in terms of actually being a profession. And it was like, ooh, that sounds really interesting. And I did a lot of research at that point, and it was like, okay, this is good, but I can't find the piece that brought it all together, the spiritual piece for me.
yep,
And so it was like, okay, well, I put that on the shelf, but I did get certified in an assessment and was doing, it was an assessment called Core Map, which had aspects of DISC and aspects of Myers-Briggs. And so I learned about both
yeah,
of those through that and all that. And then I'm walking through Half Price Books in 2009, and this book falls off the shelf and cocks me on the head, figuratively anyway. And the book is actually titled Christian Coaching. And so that kind of unlocked another deal. And this has been the story of my life. I get frustrated, I get stuck, like you said, and there will be a door open, or there'll be something that kind of
yeah,
unlocks it, or something that, oh, there's a crack here. Let me go explore the crack, and it turns out to be a wide valley instead of a crack, or something.
yeah,
And so that's what this was. It led me to a coach school, Professional Christian Coaching Institute, where I actually got certified in coaching. And there's all kinds of levels of coaching, right?
yeah,
There's the coach that, they use the term coach because they're really a consultant, but they like to give advice. That's one type of coach.
yeah,
Then there's this other type of coach that's more of a non-directive coach, and that's really what the International Coach Federation talks
yeah,
about, and those types of things. So I'm over on that side of things. I
yeah,
don't want to give advice. I don't want to tell you what to do, but I do want to help you, well, as you said, do that application piece. How do you take what you have and figure out how to apply it? How do you
mm,
use it in your life? And so that's where I really get my coaching power from, my coaching drive from, is to help people get to where they want to go. Not where
yeah.
I want them to go, but to get to where they want to go.
100%. Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I completely fall on that same side myself. And I completely echo that. And what I find interesting when I do talk to other coaches or people in this sort of industry, we want to call it, in the sort of coaching or well-being as an umbrella, is the sort of that initial sort of thing that got them to go into it. And it's interesting you said that you saw it and you were kind of like, oh, I'll come back to that, because that was kind of similar in my experience. I first heard about it when I was in my coaching, about my mid-20s, on a management course that I was in the company I was working at the time. I didn't then go back to it for another 10 years. And it was kind of like, you kind of think, oh God, why didn't I go back? But I knew with the reflection pieces, I wasn't ready in my mid-20s to do it. It's only then when 10 years later, I was like, actually, no, I'm ready to kind of go onto that specific path or journey and go into it, that there's a lot of learning for yourself, I think, sometimes before you can go into that space. And after you allow yourself to live and not judge why you didn't do it back then. I'm
Right.
interested in, though, when it comes to coaching, in a sense of people that being sort of specific, or the sort of the theory of niche, and obviously the fact that you know, as putting yourself as a Christian coach. What this is, I'm just interested in the sense of, what do you think defines you then? As what does it mean for you to be a Christian coach or a coaching Christian, whichever way you word it? I'm just interested in the definition.
What does it mean to me? Well, actually, what I call myself now is I call myself a calling coach,
Love it.
because I've never heard anybody else call themselves a calling coach. So I
Yes.
figure that's a very unique niche, right?
Yeah.
If I resonate with calling coach, then that I've already niched it down, right?
Yes.
As one of the things I say is I don't necessarily have to coach just Christians. What I have to do is I have to have people that are open. Okay. They have to be ready for my language, because I'm coming at it from a Christian perspective, and there's going to be things come out of my mouth that are more Christianese. If you bristle at that, then we're probably not going to work together really well.
Yeah.
But if you're open to it, realizing that I'm not trying to force my beliefs on you, I'm not trying to tell you, I'm just trying to use the wisdom the way that I interpret it. Okay. And trying to get you to understand, how do you use your wisdom to go
Mm.
forward with that? And so I don't really call myself a Christian coach per se,
Yeah.
as much as I call myself a calling coach.
Love it. Yeah. No, no, I love that, because it's because I think, though, it's, as you say, though, it's the it gives there's an element of that spirituality that I think as well, though, that the more that I'm sort of within exposing myself to this industry and people, I find it interesting, though, that it's something that more and more people are looking for. Not necessarily, as you say, and I think then we can get sort of I love the word you said, bristle, there, in a sense of when it comes to sort of religious language and stuff, and there could be an element of a perspective that has to be completely secular language, or you can't go there type thing, and I'm not sure about that myself. I don't think it's, sort of limiting language. I think is kind of a bit of a, well, why would you limit it? As you say, though, but if it does kind of bristle you, then you're not the person that's going to get the most benefit from working with someone like yourself. But it's but going back to my point, though, is like, have you found, though, that now that you're in this space of a calling coach, that there are people who are really wanting this sort of coaching?
Yes, I think so. There's a lot of people that really resonate with it. And
Mm,
of course, from a practical point of view, I've got multiple layers of things, right? So I start out with a workshop, 70-minute, 75-minute workshop type of thing to help people understand what the benefits are to following your calling, because there's a lot of benefits. You get
mm,
peace, you get joy, you get direction, you get fulfillment, you get growth, all these types of things that you get when you start stepping into your calling and such like that and start
mm.
following it. You get all that. So, okay, all right, now that I know kind of what the benefits are, well, I've got a 5-day challenge, or a super workshop where I put 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours together, and all of these are paid because, people pay for what they value, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't charge a lot for the workshop. I charge a little bit more for the 5-day challenge or whatever. But at the end, if you want to work with me for 6 months or whatever, I've got a package that's $7,500. So, it's all, and that can be broken up and done in pieces as you have money or whatever type of thing. So it's not, I've got the pieces in place where people can go as deep as what they want to
Yeah.
go at the time they want to go for it, right?
Yeah.
And timing is a big thing. Okay, everybody has their own timing. Like you said, sometimes the timing's not right. Sometimes you have to go live another 10 years of life
Yeah.
before this really makes sense to you. And
Yes.
so, I'm not trying to force this on anybody, but I'm trying to make it available to anybody that is looking, that is seeking, that is wondering.
Mm.
And the other thing I'd like to say, as we're talking about it this way, You've used religion. I actually think God is more in the relationship than he is in the religion. Okay.
Mm,
So the fact that I use God and I use Jesus Christ and I use these things, it's not to say that that's my relationship. And so I'm going to honor
mm,
that, just like I'm going to talk about Kayla, my wife.
mm,
I'm going to talk about them with names that apply to me. If
mm,
you've got a relationship with something else and you can call it the universe or whatever, as long as you can interpret my language and I can interpret your
mm.
language, we can work together. Okay.
Yeah.
Because at the end, I do believe, being a Jesus follower, I believe what Jesus said, that there's one way, one truth, one life, uh, and he is that way. I believe that. Okay. I will state that. But it's really up to God to bring you to that point or not, as the case may be. And
Mm.
so if you don't believe it, that's okay. I'm not going to try and change your belief. I'm
Yeah.
just going to tell you this is what I believe and this is why I believe it.
Yeah.
And so like I said, I'm not going to try and force anything on anybody.
Yeah. No, but
Not my time.
yeah, no, but see, what I find when what I love when I talk to people, and this is what, why one of the reasons why I started the show was to find out about people is like, I really admire people that really know themselves and really um, are proactive in what they believe with their actions. So you see what I mean? So it's like it's that sort of phrase of action speaks 1,000 words type thing. Because there's this thing of like, because one of the things that, and I'll share a little bit there with you in relation to the show. This is what it'll be the 83rd person I think I've had on the show now. So, and this theme kept coming up about people saying at times, I want to be myself. I just want to be myself. And so I was like, well, what does that actually mean? To me and to the people. And one of the sort of the simplest explanations I came up was like, is what you say and do a true reflection of how you think and feel? So for yourself, Dale, it's kind of like if you were, in your head, you're thinking, well, I'm a Christian. I believe in following in Jesus Christ, but you didn't say it, you didn't do it, then you're not honoring how you're really thinking and feel. But on the other hand, if you were just saying it, but you were kind of not really believing it, you're doing it just to coax, manipulate people and take money off people, and you're not really being yourself. Do you know what I mean? It's the truest thing is actually someone, I think it's the most admirable thing for me is when people actually are completely all in on who they are. So I really appreciate how you share yourself because I think it because you sharing who you are there, hopefully you'll enable other people to be who they are. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's actually one of the big pieces in my coaching program. There's basically three big pieces to what I do. And piece number one is identity. I call it
Mm,
identity. And it's really the answer to the question, who are you?
yeah.
More specifically for me, who are you inside yourself?
Yeah.
Okay. And I say that because the next piece is community. And they
Mm,
overlap a lot, okay?
mm,
Because you can't really know who you are unless you know who you are within a group, okay?
yeah.
Acceptance is one of the basic brain science needs that we all have. We have to be accepted somewhere,
Yeah.
okay? And that's the community piece for me, okay? And that's the second big piece in my coaching system.
Yeah.
And then the third big piece is calling. And
Mm,
calling is, why are you here?
yeah.
So the questions really come down to who are you and why are you here? If you can
Yeah.
answer those at a deep core level, you're going to be, like you said, you're going to be who you are, you're going to be yourself, and you're going to know how to act like yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you know how to act like yourself, that's when the magic starts happening.
Yeah.
One of my best clients, this was in 2019 that I started coaching her, and she had self-published 16 books at the time, and she was owner publisher of a neighborhood magazine franchise type thing, right? Yet she was burnt out. She was overworked, frustrated. She had already decided this is not for me. but she didn't know what was for her, right?
Yeah.
This isn't working. I'm going to do something else. I don't know what to do. Okay. I took her through my identity piece, which involves spiritual gifts, values assessments, and the Clifton Strengths, the Strength Finder assessment at a deep core level. And uh, first thing that happened, she took the assessment and she called up and she said, "Dale, your test is broken." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, this says communication is like number 14 for me. I self-published 16 books, all this sort of stuff." And I'm going, "Okay, well, why don't you just trust the process and let's get
Yeah.
through it here." And so we got down to number 14, and sure enough, it was right where it needed to be and all that. Turned out that the 16 books that she'd self-published, well, 12 of them were journals. And so she wasn't actually doing a lot of the writing and creating. She was creating space for other people to do the writing.
Yeah.
Okay. And so anyway, so she pivoted. She basically set up a whole new company. She went back, through the coaching. She went back through some of the stuff that she'd done well in the past. And she said, "Okay, I'm going to set up a virtual administration system, a virtual assistant
Yeah.
system." And she was fully booked in 90 days.
Wow.
Okay. No, not 90 days. She was fully booked in 30 days. And so, uh, and she was looking for people to help her to actually do the work. And now, 5 years later, almost 5 years later, she has 17 or 18 people working for her, all part-time, all,
Yeah.
she's organizing it all together. She's got 30 plus clients worldwide, and all this sort of stuff. And she's just knocking it out of the park. And she's actually
Yeah.
taking the next step into how she's going to help people.
Yeah.
So it's really just an amazing system
Yeah.
that's gone on well for that.
Yeah.
But what she said is when I stopped trying to be what everybody else wanted me to be, and I started being myself, that's when the magic happened.
Yeah. 100%. That's a great story. It's fantastic as I say one thing she said at the end, but what's amazing though, um, for people who haven't gone through anything like this, any sort of process like this, whether it be a coaching thing or even a mentoring or anything like that, to or even just given the moment to ask those questions to yourself, because that whole thing again of like you call in there, right, the identity piece in sense of that question again of who am I, who are you? We can all have these surface level assumptions of who we are. That's the way I would call them myself. You know what I mean? It's like they can almost be the most obvious things, and people come out with the most sort of when you ask them certain questions, whether it's like this one, that what's important to your question, we come up with like, oh, people can say, oh, it's my family and my friends, and they're not to dismiss them, but it's like, yeah, but that's almost like a gimme. Like, what's you got to, as you say, go further into it. The fact that she almost was disagreeing with your process and thinking, how can it be
Mhm.
so low? How can it be so low? It was like, because your the questions you're answering is like these are the deeper questions, so it's not as high, but the surface was saying that it was. So I find it really interesting when people go through that and they actually, because they'll discover, oh, I didn't actually realize that, or it was there lurking in the background. And what you do, or what I hope I try to do myself, is give people the space to say these things or do these things that they may be too scared to say or forgot to say. So it's a great space that you've created that people allow themselves to say these things that they might not have said before or even known about themselves.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to my story when
Yeah.
back in 1992, my heart finally told my head, "You're made for something bigger,"
Yeah.
and it's like, that's a coaching moment. There
Yes.
wasn't a coach around, but that's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. That's the great thing about the ICF type coaches is they give you the space, okay? And they're the second set of ears, right?
Yes.
So when you say something, you may be just rolling along, verbally processing out loud or whatever, and you say something and they say, "Oh, wait a minute. You just said blah, blah, blah." And you go, "I did? Yeah, you did." oh, I needed to hear myself say that, type of thing.
Yeah.
That's one of the big values that a lot of people don't see right off the bat about coaching.
Yes. 100%. Absolutely. Um, One of the other questions I'm always interested to ask people that come on who are, you've gone from an employment background now into more into a self-employment or a sort of your own sort of business. How did you find that transition yourself, going from the sort of working within a company to now trying to do it out on your own?
Well, my transition wasn't as abrupt as it seems. I'll just
Yeah.
put it that way. Back when I was age 9, my father was running a lawnmower shop out of his garage, and I started working for him in his lawnmower shop. And so by age 12, I could take lawnmowers apart and put them back together, and they'd run and have no parts left over. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's the big thing with the mechanics, right? You don't
Yeah.
have parts left over. And so I did some of that very early, and then I went at age 16, I went and got a job at a grocery store sacking groceries or whatever,
Yep.
So, and then I was basically all in the mental side of, I just want to make money and I'm just going to be the best employee or whatever. But interestingly enough, back in 2000, I'd been working for this guy for about 4 years. He'd recruited me into the computer consulting arena. And we'd I followed him to a second job, and during that second job, they basically had recruited a whole group of us to come in, and then they basically shut us down after a year. We were profitable, but they wanted to follow. This was in 1999. They wanted to
Mm.
follow the .com and
Yeah.
do all the websites and all that sort of stuff, and so they were letting us go. So he negotiated an agreement where we could take this division and roll it off and start our own company. So I
Okay.
was part of a startup company even back then, part of an
Okay.
entrepreneur
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
We actually hit in year 2000, starting at almost zero. We actually moved a whole lot of hardware and very low profit margin or whatever. We did some consulting, and we hit number 10 on the Entrepreneur Hot 100, fastest growing
Wow.
100 companies in the US. So that was 2000, we hit number 10. And then in 2002, we hit number 23.
Wow.
And so I was part of the startup company. I was vice
Yeah.
president of the startup company and all that sort of stuff.
Very
And so
cool.
we were growing great guns. And then we had some leadership issues and crises, and we had to shut the company down in 2004. So it was a really wild ride. And
Yeah.
it was really interesting. But because of that, I'd been part of that. Then I
Yes.
moved to this other company, and I was basically part of this division. I actually worked for that guy from 1996 to 2009, 13 years. I
Wow.
worked for him as my boss
Yeah.
over 4 companies,
Nice.
including that startup company.
Yeah.
Uh, and but then, he and I basically created this division in this new company that we went to, the fourth one. And that one took off. And then in 2008, 2009, we had that recession in the States with the housing crisis and
Yep.
everything. And he actually told them, well, you need to lay me off and keep Dale, because Dale's the key that's holding this together,
Wow.
and he went off and found another job, and we're still good friends. I talk to him
Yeah.
every year or two. But he was great. But so, the whole thing about that whole story
Yeah.
is, even in that fourth company, I was doing a lot of entrepreneurial type
Yes.
things because I was
Yes.
working essentially for myself for a long
Yeah.
time. As part of I had a bigger structure and everything.
Yeah.
So when I started getting into the coaching business, I set up my business, but I was working full time in IT for another 5 years after I
Right.
got my first coaching class. And so it was like, okay, I'm not really pushing, I'm not really trying to grow. I don't even really know
Yeah.
what my business is doing, type of thing. And then in 2016, they came to me and they said, well, Dale, you've been talking about going to part time in the IT side of things. We think April 1st is a good time to do that. And it was like totally unexpected. And there's a whole nother story behind
Yeah.
that. But anyway, it was like, oh, it's a great time in all these great ways. And not so great in all these other ways, right? But I had to go ahead and take the chance. And so I took the chance, and that's when I feel like I started coaching full time, and working IT part time is really
Yes.
how I see it. But I wasn't really coaching full time. I was coaching very, very part time, and I was trying to build my coaching business for the
Yes.
rest of the time. And something that was really helpful to me during that time was going back and rereading the E-Myth, the E-Myth Revisited, where he talks about any entrepreneurial startup, there's only one person working there, but you actually
Yeah.
have three different roles, right? You've got
Yes.
the technician or the person that's doing whatever it is that you're delivering, and you got the entrepreneur, the guy that had this entrepreneurial seizure so that he could go create this company, and
Yeah.
he's the dreamer and the visionary and all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. And then you've actually got the manager that has to keep both of these roles in line and make sure that there's enough entrepreneur bringing in enough business for the technician to do the business and all that sort of
Yes.
stuff. And so, seeing those three roles was just a very, uh, seeing them again, because I'd read the book earlier, but seeing them
Yes.
again was one of those. It's like, okay, yeah, this is where I need to go apply some of that learning that I learned way back then, and
Yeah.
I need to apply it. And so, yeah, it's definitely been one of those roller coasters of
Yes.
uh, chasing the wrong dream, maybe in some cases.
Yeah.
But in other cases, it's like, oh, this really did work really well. So,
Yeah. But no, I thank you again for sharing that, because the reason I asked that question again, though, because I think there's a lot of people that do listen who are kind of maybe either on that edge, they're thinking about it, they've got that kind of like, because that's kind of a bit of my story as well, of wanting to do that a little bit, something different, do something for yourself. And and even just for myself there, like that sort of, there's those moments, the realities, I think we can get caught up of wanting the result before the process. Do you know what I mean? The immediacy of not just in just life in general now, because everything I've grown up in the sense of, yeah, well, where was I? God, I was listening. Don't know if I was listening to or watching something, yeah, the other day where, I don't know if it was a comedian or something. It's an Irish American comedian called Des Bishop. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he was talking about how, that there wasn't the phrase of mindfulness when he was a kid, because you had not, you just, there wasn't anything to do. There wasn't anything to distract you. So you were like, I was on the bus, I was mindful because I didn't have a phone, or I didn't have anything. So, or if I was waiting for someone, I was just waiting for them. But we're in a space where it's almost like the immediacy of everything is just there. And so that story you shared about your journey, in a sense of moving to the various different roles you've had and into all of that entrepreneurial stuff, is the time that this things can take. That you have to almost like honor the time that it takes to build something and to do something and to try and to fail, and that roller coaster. So it's a really important lesson for me personally, but I think for people listening, that it's um just because it's not necessarily happening straight away doesn't mean that nothing's happening.
exactly, exactly. And you said fail, and I don't believe there's really failure unless you die, right? Okay. So
Yeah.
I use fail as an acronym. Fail is first attempt in learning.
Yeah.
Okay. And so,
Mhm.
when if you learn something from it, you're not a loser.
Yeah.
Okay. You might have won. If you win, you probably don't learn a whole lot because you already knew it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can be a winner, or you can be a learner, or you can be a loser. And a loser is somebody that doesn't learn from the not winning.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Absolutely. No, I love it. Um, I love to ask this question to people whenever I have them on the show. I am definitely one that I feel that quotes and phrases, things like that, can be quite powerful if they have a real meaning and application. So, are there any quotes or phrases that are really important to you?
One of the biggest ones for me is this phrase. What's the difference between an inheritance and a legacy? What's the difference between an inheritance and a legacy? And I like to say it this way. It's a single word of two characters. An inheritance is what you leave to someone. A legacy is what you leave in someone.
Mm. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
That's because we've heard the word legacy quite, it's one of those, definitely those words that's, um, we hear quite a bit from a business perspective, or business in my thing, or people, but I've never heard it in that way before. Because to me, sometimes legacy comes across, whenever I hear people talk about it, quite a grand thing, quite a big
Hmm.
thing, in the sense of the mark that they've left on a wider group. But the way you're describing it now is back down to that individual. It's what
Hmm.
they've got inside them versus, so, because, yeah, it brings it back to the person, to the whoever that is that you've interacted with. Now, there could be hundreds, could be thousands, but it's focusing on that one person. That's very, very powerful.
Right. You know,
Mm.
or maybe it's a whole bunch of one persons, right?
Yes, exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah, groups of them, and it's the thing of like, but each of that whole group could have taken something very different,
Hmm.
because it's bespoke to them. If you know what I mean, it's like whatever you have shared or done, as much you could have shared the same thing to everyone, but they'll each take it in their own way.
Right.
And how they've decided to bring it into themselves and interpret it themselves, versus you say going, well, here's just something here that's tangible as such. You know what I mean? It's physical, that could be there, but it's how that thing is there. It's a really interesting way of looking at it. I never thought about that way before. Thank you for sharing that.
It's a very deep quote, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's one of those I'm trying to live by, you know. Now,
yeah,
the best thing would be if you could do both, you know, you leave
sure.
legacy and an inheritance. But if I had to choose between an inheritance and a legacy, I care more about the legacy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because it kind of reminds me, and I'm gonna butcher it now, in a sense of, I think it was, oh God, I'm trying to think how many people have shared it with me. I'm going to forget the person as well now, because you're thinking it's the whole thing of, it's how, the end of it is like, it's not what you do, it's not what you say, it's how you make people feel. You know what I mean? It's that, coming back to that quote again. It's like, they'll forget everything else. So it's kind of like, but that takes it almost like that little bit step further, because it is that, and that comes back, I'm sure, back to, and this is why I love to ask the quote at this point, because after talking to you, it makes sense, in a sense of the three areas you were talking about before, in a sense of, one is that identity, one is that community, and then the calling. Because it's encompassing all three of those things, like, because it's whatever someone brings into themselves. It's like, well, actually, that, to me, that means that they've kind of connected everything that you were talking about earlier, their head and their heart, and they're allowing something into themselves, so they know who they are. But they're gonna, if it resonates with them, the likelihood is going to resonate with the rest of their community as well, so it brings them closer to them as well. So it's not, I think one of the other things, I don't know if you've experienced this as well, is like, when working with people or hearing people, is like, they can have this tendency to think that they're the only one. They're the only one that's either going through whatever challenges or suffering or pain. Um, but the truth is, we've all had that for millennia, have experienced the same things. It's just that when we think it's just ourselves, we kind of isolate ourselves. But what you say there can open it up to the community piece, that
Mhm.
it's shared, like, it's not just the individual. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's, you could say, like, it's sending me off in so many different directions, that quote. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And you know, one of the other ones is hurt people, right?
Yeah,
Well, the other half of that is healed people, heal people.
yeah,
Okay. And so when you put those together, you know, when you isolate, okay, first of all, isolation is one of the worst things you can do to anyone
yeah,
intentionally.
yes,
Okay. Why would anybody ever do that to themselves? You
yeah,
know, I mean, you know, you get the hardest prisoners, the hardest criminals in prison, and what do they do to enforce their will on them even more? They put them in solitary confinement, right?
mm,
Okay. They isolate them. They turn off all the relationships. Okay. And that's why I came to the conclusion that it was both identity and community
yeah,
to really fit together. In other words, to be able to do that, because when you're hurt by people, you can't heal by yourself.
mm,
When
mm,
you hurt by people, it's other people that are going to help heal you.
yeah. Yeah, 100%. I love it. Um, the next one I'd like to ask always the people is like, who do you think have been the biggest influences in your life?
Uh, I actually wrote a chapter in a book around some of my mentors.
Amazing.
The person that I mentioned that I worked for 13 years across four
Yeah.
companies, 𝘿𝙖𝙡𝙚, he was a big mentor for me. Hugh Jones, he was in our company in that startup company for 2 or 3 years. He was a big mentor because he really did encourage me to take a more active management role and more of a leadership role. And he was one of these people that, I mean, you talk about phrases or quotes or whatever. He had a whole encyclopedia of them. He was always coming out with good ones. But one of the ones that I remember from him was, um, this. Let me set up the situation. There
Yeah.
was a group of us. We were all in the conference room. We were all arguing about something. I don't even remember what it was we were arguing. He was sitting at the back of the room, and we voices were getting louder and louder and everything. And during just a short pause, he said, "Gentlemen," and he said it about that high, but just carried through the whole room.
Yeah.
"Gentlemen, you are in violent agreement."
Mm.
And all of us said, "What did he say?
Yeah.
Violent agreement." And we started thinking about what we'd been arguing about. We were all arguing for the same result, for the same outcome, but we
Yes.
all wanted to do it in a different way. And so we were
Yes.
arguing about how are we going to do it, as opposed
Yes.
to first coming to agreement on what we wanted to do and what the outcome we wanted, and then deciding in
Yeah.
a very neutral form what's the best way to get there. So,
Yes. That's a
so
really that's you can just I could the way you said I can just picture the sort of the situation just that just dropping in the air and everyone kind of looking at each other and that like it's a really but isn't that sort of like shows you the sort of the real power of a say like a mentor or someone that can because when I say because and I've said this to a few people the whole term of I think influence has unfortunately been a little bit sort of diminished in more recent times in a sense of the terminology of an influencer, and it's like it seems it maybe got more connotations of sort of slightly one sort of more manipulative in my perspective at the moment versus like that's true influence in a sense or true mentorship with that gentleman there because you kind of like okay that's like however long years ago and you still remember that sort of like how he was able to sort of get a group of people who were say fighting for the same thing, just wanting their voices to be heard, the loudest type thing, and just with 3 words or 4 words can just literally get everyone to kind of. That's really powerful, isn't it?
it is.
Yeah.
Reminds me of a phrase that I heard. I think John Maxwell said this. He said, um, "What's the difference between manipulation and motivation? Manipulation is when you're doing it for your benefit. Motivation is when you're doing it for their benefit."
Yes. Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. Now, I've only it was another gentleman I spoke to last year who mentioned about John Maxwell. And I hadn't sort of looked at him much, but it's not a sense of like that gentleman. I've looked at his work more recently, and it's again very very powerful. And the thing as well, I think with the sort of allowing people to have that influence on us, um, or it's an open thing because it comes back to again the whole thing of what you said earlier, like people need other people to help them, and I think it's allowing the right or potentially the better sort of voices to come to us in a sense of and being open to it. And I suppose this is a slight tangent from that or onto that question is one of the things I'm sure that you probably had to learn through those years or over those years working with you is the ability to ask for help. Because that's kind of one of those things as well where there is at some point if you're in a position where you think I want to change but you don't know how or you're thinking you can do it all on your own but actually at some point you might need to reach out to anyone someone what how did you find I suppose the most positive the benefit for yourself being in those situations where you asked for help?
If it takes me too long to get something done, I need to ask for help.
Yeah.
Okay. It just, I mean, that's the thing I've learned over my almost 70 years here on planet Earth is that I can't do it all.
Yeah.
Okay. We're not designed to do it all. We're
Yeah.
human. We're not God, right? We can't just speak things into existence or whatever else you believe about your higher power or whatever. Okay. It's really the fact that we are limited, we are finite. There's 24 hours in the day for each and every one of those, and most of us are going to have to sleep a third of that, more or less. It's just one of those things. You got to accept your limitations. The limitations don't make you worse; they make you
Mm,
human.
mm,
Okay, and when they make you human and you embrace your humanity, how can I take my humanity and do something positive with it?
mm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, you shared obviously the little bit about your programs and what you've done. The last question, I suppose, in relation to your what you do now as a coach, is there a particular sort of? I'm always asked. This is where I want to ask is I'm always interested in when talking to coaches or people who work with other people that they're clients. What sort of role or do your clients play in your life now? Just not from a business perspective, but just for yourself.
Uh, I celebrate them. To
Yeah.
me, my clients are part of my legacy.
Yes.
I mentioned the lady that had created the new company and done so
Mm,
great. Well, she set up a virtual administration company. I hired her.
yeah.
And so she has actually helped me create my company here, in some
Yes.
form or fashion over the last 5 years. Her company does a lot of work for me, and I think she does great work. Recommended her to, I don't know, hundreds, if not thousands of people over time, and dozens of them have become clients over time. So, it's one of those things that we have almost a mutual beneficial
Yeah.
relationship there. There's other clients that, I've done for maybe a month or 2 months and then they've gone off, but I wish them well. I'm not trying to be here to be your best bud forever and ever,
No.
okay? But I am trying to help you get to the life that you want to get to.
Yeah.
And so, and if I do that in any sort of form or fashion, big or small, that's part of the legacy that I'm leaving.
Yeah, no, I love it. Love it. Um, Dale, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Really, really fascinating and so much for myself to think, and I'm sure for everyone listening to think about. I have one more question for you, and that is what's important for your future?
What's important for my future is that I stay on the path that I'm on, that I figure out how to support myself a little bit better during this time. And part of that is putting those programs together so that I can affect as many people as I possibly can and get them set up towards the calling, help them figure out what their calling is, help them
Mm,
follow it better at whatever level it makes sense for me to help them at. And so, structuring my programs like I talked about earlier was a big key for me
yeah,
to set up my future and to go forward with it. So,
love it.
yeah.
Love it. I say I obviously want to make sure that people know where to find you and support you and contact you. So obviously we'll share all anywhere they can find you online in the show notes. But if you want to give a shout out now where people can follow and connect with you online.
Uh, Best place is either website, coachdale.com, or LinkedIn. There's a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, just look for Coach Dale and you can actually just find me right quick there.
Brilliant.
Or drop me an email, dale@coachdale.com.
Lovely stuff. And you say all of those links are going to be in the show notes so you can find there. So once again, Dale, thank you so much for chatting to me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, it's been great. You've been a great podcast host and, can't ask for anything more. And I wish you the best. And I certainly want you to connect with me and let me see how I can help you as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you for watching or listening to this episode. I really hope you enjoyed the conversation. To support the show, please subscribe on your favorite platform, share your favorite episode, get involved with your comments, and give the show a rating. If you want to learn more about what I do, you can follow me at James Dean Coaching on Facebook and Instagram, connect with me on LinkedIn, or check out my website, jamesdeancoaching.com.